Sai Ram, offering my humble pranams at the lotus feet of beloved Swami on the occasion of his 100th birthday, would like to make the small offering of how I came to Swami. My name is Satish Menon, and I live in Singapore with my wife and 2 boys, and we've been living here for the last 19 years. I grew up in Bombay in India in a very loving household where my parents were close to Swami shortly before I was born. So Swami's pictures were in my house all through, but I knew very little about him. For my parents were very loving, values-driven, but we never really spoke about Swami's teachings and what that meant. So I really didn't understand very much other than just praying to Swami. I did see Swami a couple of times in my childhood when we went to Dharmakshetra and stood for the Nagar Sankirtan. And I still remember the sight of him coming and waving beautifully while everybody sang. But that was it. That's all I remember, and that's the closest I've ever got to Swami or even understanding anything about him. As I grew up, while I did believe in a universal God, I wouldn't say that I was particularly following Swami or anyone in particular. I believed in a God for all. I believed in the unity of all religions and was always interested, but never too caught up in religious practice or rituals, etc. And certainly didn't follow any guru by any yardstick. Life was wonderful, and I studied and grew up in Bombay. I started working, got married, and later moved to Singapore, working for a leading multinational bank at that time. And the scene cuts to the year 2009, where I was zipping around the world on work, living the high corporate life, great friends, family was happy, a loving 3-year-old at home. There was nothing overtly calling me out in the Godward direction, so to speak, except for a simple thought. I just wondered if there was anything more to life than this. That's when suddenly, when I was working on a product launch for my company, which involved various corporations, and we had to do something in Bangalore, which was a big event, and I was working hard for that. And I was on the way to work one morning, just like any other, in a taxi in Singapore. And as the taxi slowed down to my destination, which is my office, the cab driver, out of the blue, suddenly without any warning, he asked me, "Do you know Sathya Sai Baba?" Caught me by surprise because he wasn't even Indian. It was a Chinese taxi driver. And he says, "Yes, I do. But what's this about?" And just then, the taxi pulled up at the last stop. And as I got up and I paid the cash to him, he looked at me straight in the eye and said, "If he's calling you, you should go, you know." And just took the money and drove away before I could even register what just happened. There was no prompting. There was nothing that told him that I knew and there was a connection with Sai Baba, though it was distantly, it was remote from my childhood, but not one-to-one, not real, not connected with him really on the inside. So when I came home from work that day, I told my wife of this incredible incident of the Chinese taxi driver and about this fact that Swami is calling me. And she instantly responded that if he's calling you, you should go. But just then a thought flashed to me that in a week from that day, there was this product launch going on in Bangalore. It was a big event, but it was in Bangalore. And I knew Puttaparthi was just a few hours away from that. And so if I could make that trip to Puttaparthi, perhaps I could go and see him. Now, the moment I said that my initial thought was like, that's so uncool. I'm a corporate guy. I'm cool. I like the glitz and glamour. I don't go to pilgrimage spots and that sort of thing. But still, it was nagging at me. And so I decided in the midst of all that preparation that I would just stay back one extra day and give it a shot. And perhaps just take this car ride to Puttaparthi and see what happens. The launch went off very well. It was a big event. My boss from the US came down. There were press, there were cameras, there was glitz and glamour, and there was high pressure. So you can imagine the intensity of a high corporate event. And that's what the day was all about. And the next morning, I stayed back and very hesitatingly, not telling anyone, decided to execute my secret plan, not wanting anyone to know that I'm so uncool that I'm going to a pilgrimage spot to see a guru. And so I secretly called for a taxi. And before I knew it, I was in the cab driving to Puttaparthi. While I was in the cab, I had tremendous misgivings. And I was wondering, where am I going? Driving into a village to see someone I had pictures of but had no real relationship, and wondering why I was doing this. Despite all those misgivings, I made it to Puttaparthi. It was the morning, and it happened to be a Thursday. It wasn't planned, as you can imagine. I didn't know what the protocol was. I knew there was an ashram there, and I was just in time to catch the morning darshan. And so I walked in to the Sai Kulwant hall, and I sat there hoping that Baba would come. And soon enough, he did. There were bhajans going on, and Swami was rolled in. He was quite old and weak in his wheelchair then. And I just saw him at a distance. There is a beauty of when you actually travel with no expectations or no desires or not knowing anything. My idea of a darshan never included things like close proximity to Swami, having darshan, sparshan, sambhashan, having him, look at me, talk to me, touch him, having a personal interview. These notions were not even known. The expectation was darshan equals I get to see him at whatever distance, and that was good enough. So having only that expectation, there was no question of being disappointed or otherwise. So as I went, the crowd was moderate that day. Swami came in, wheeled in. He looked around. There was nothing spectacular, though it was very peaceful, very harmonious, very nice, very different from what I was used to. And the darshan ended. And I came out of the Sai Kulwant hall wondering what do I do next. The flight back from Bangalore was only scheduled that evening. So they told me there's another darshan in the afternoon and you could stay for that. So I looked around at a couple of places of interest that they showed me, which was very nice. And I felt something different within myself. No, it wasn't a majorly spiritual thought or anything, but I just felt very light-hearted. It was indescribable to me because I'd just come out from this every heavy corporate intense atmosphere. And I found myself frivolously roaming the streets, playing cricket on the streets with the urchin boys, being generally laughing and being merry. That's what I remember that afternoon to be. After a few of these light-hearted moments, had a nice lunch and came in for the afternoon darshan. Now, when in time for the afternoon darshan, there was a huge crowd this time because it was a Thursday evening. Students were there and there was a program. And I was right at the back end of the Sai Kulwant hall, literally the last gate. That's how far I was. And the program was going on. Again, no expectations. Swami was wheeled in. The music was there. The functions were there. And then I noticed I didn't want to leave as long as Swami was there on stage, wait for the arati and so on. But the program kept going on, and I was getting worried because my car was waiting, and I needed to take the car ride back in time for my flight from Bangalore to Singapore. So I waited as long as I could, but the program didn't show any signs of finishing, and I decided I had to go. So hesitatingly, I stood up at the back door of the back gate of Sai Kulwant hall, and I just wanted to have a few seconds of commune, internal commune with Swami at that moment. So I just looked at him and said, mentally that is, I don't know why you called. I don't know why I came. I didn't expect anything. But this was really lovely and I quite enjoyed the day. Thank you. This is literally all that I said mentally. And up to this point, in the morning, for example, there was no eye contact or there was no direct connection between Swami and me at that point, other than the fact that he was being wheeled in. But at that very second, I noticed Swami, who was, quite frail at that point. He was slumped on the chair, right? But at that very second, when this internal conversation happened, Swami, with his apparent frailty, put his hands on the sidebar, stood up upright, stiff as a cobra. This is not common at that time. He stood stiff, and I could see clearly, or I certainly felt, that he looked directly at me at the far end of the hall. So it would have been a distance of close to 75 to 100 meters. That's how far I was. But the look was very straight. And he looked for about 5 or 7 seconds. I'll never forget those 5 or 7 seconds as long as I live. Because in that look, there was a flash. Something happened. And I was just caught by some sort of a jolt. And then I stepped out, went out of the hall, got into my cab ride, and I don't know what happened from that point as the cab drove back to Bangalore. From that point, towards the entirety of the cab ride, as I checked in for the flight, throughout the entire duration of that night flight from Bangalore to Singapore, till I reached back home in Singapore, probably would have been a time duration of at least 10 to 12 hours in total. All I know is I was sitting like this with my eyes blown off, wondering what happened. I couldn't move an inch. My eyes were in a state of a blur, just in a state of shock, no sleep. It was just something just struck me like you've been hit with a thunderbolt. And that was the feeling I had through the entire duration of that flight, not understanding at all what just happened. As I came back home into Singapore, I was still in that reverie and high. And I just told my wife that, look, something has happened. I have no idea. I didn't expect anything, but certainly something happened. No physical contact, no explanations. Something inside, a sensation that was totally inexplicable, had overcome me, and I was struck by this. This was the point at which it all started. This provoked a deep interest in me to understand more about Swami, to learn more about his teachings, read more, and that was the beginning of the journey. Much has happened hence in that beautiful journey of love. And I'm so delighted that Swami has given this opportunity to share this with you with all my love. Thank you for listening. Gratitude to Swami. Sai Ram.